Hi friends, welcome back to another Foster Care Friday. I am filming this on Friday. I don't know if I'll get it up on Friday or it may be Saturday, but I'm filming it at the end of the day on Black Friday. As you know, it was a holiday week and I was spending time with family. So I just haven't had time until now to film a video, but here I am. I'm going to get it at least filmed on Friday. Hopefully I'll be able to edit it and get it up. But if not, then definitely on Saturday. So today I just want to talk about, it's the last Friday of National Adoption Awareness Month here in the United States. And I just want to talk about the process of adopting from foster care and what that process looks like, or at least kind of a high level overview of what that process can look like. For my last Adoption Awareness Month video of this month of this year. So if you're interested in that, stick around. But first, if you're new here, my name is Anna Leonora. Together with my husband, Jason, we are foster parents in real life. And here on my channel from the Fosters, we do foster parenting life together and we raise awareness for the foster care system. So if any of that interests you, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel down below. Don't forget to hit your post notification bell so that you won't miss when I post any new videos like this, and so you can join my growing cyber family here on YouTube. Now that I got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what the process looks like to adopt from the foster care system in the United States. Apologies. If you were here last week, you know that I was getting a little bit sick. I had a pretty severe case of bronchitis, but I am on antibiotics and steroids and I'm not contagious. But I am still getting better from that. So I have still a little bit of a cough. I will try to snip out in editing as many coughs as I can, but if I'm coughing at all or I sound a little funny, that is why I'm still getting over my really, really bad bronchitis. Okay, so I want to start the video by saying that adoption from foster care is going to look different in every state, county, and through every agency. Every single agency in every state and every county does things a little bit differently. So this is not going to be 100%. This is 100% what it's going to look like, how it's going to be for you. This is just what I know from my perspective, from my experience, through my county, through my agency, and kind of a high level overview of what I know across the country. But if things are different where you live, that's why, because they're going to be different everywhere. So for context, I live in the southeast of North Carolina. I won't say my particular county, but in Southeast North Carolina, I am licensed directly through the county and not through a private agency. So even within my county, how my county Department of Social Services does things is going to be different than how a private agency operating in our county does things. Okay, so everything is going to be a little bit different. These are generalities, they're high level overview. So there's that. Also, my kids are here. If you hear banging, that's why. So if you hear them banging on the door, just ignore it. My husband is out there with them. They are fine, I promise. They just don't like to be excluded. But as you know, they are not adopted yet, so they cannot appear on camera with me. So we do what we have to do. All right, so there are two main ways that, and again, high-level overview, two main ways that people adopt from foster care in the U.S. One, people come to foster care. What'd you do that for? My cat just hit me with something. Come here. This Norman. Say hi. Oh, okay. So the two main ways, the first one is that people who come to foster care solely to adopt, they don't want to foster, they have no interest in fostering, they don't like the idea of children having to go potentially back to birth families or get taken from them, so they don't want to foster, they just want to adopt. And that does look a little bit different than what they call foster to adopt. I know there's some controversy around that title, but let me first talk about people who come to foster care solely to adopt. So most of the people who come to foster care solely to adopt will do so through a private agency. This is Binks. Hey, hi. You're so handsome in this light. Look at you. Typically, people who want to just adopt from foster care will go through a private agency. And that's because if you're licensed through the county, you're going to get a lot of calls for fostering. And if that's just not something you're interested in or you don't think you can handle that, typically people coming into foster care solely to adopt will go to private agencies. Also, a lot of the private agencies hold information to children whose parental rights have already been terminated and they are already legally free and clear for adoption. And so you can just come in and say, I'm only interested in children whose parents' rights have already been terminated, right? So most private agencies will, at least in our state, and I'm pretty sure this is pretty standard across the country, in order to adopt from foster care, you do have to become a licensed foster parent. That doesn't mean you have to foster, but you have to go through all the same training, same background checks, and all the same things that a foster parent would have to go through for approval to adopt. So in my state and through my county specifically, that means 30 hours of classes, which we did 3 hours a week for 10 weeks. We did them on Thursday night from 6 to 9, and we did that for 10 weeks in a row. It also means home studies, background checks, criminal, I think they did state and federal criminal background checks, CPS checks to make sure you've never been accused of harming a child. We had to do a fire inspection in our home, the home studies, home visits. We had to get references from friends, family, coworkers. We had to do a financial check where they had to prove that we have income and are not doing this for the money or whatever you want to call it. We had to prove we could financially support ourselves and a child without any government assistance. And we had to do all of that to become a licensed foster parent. And my understanding is that in order to adopt from foster care, even if through a private agency, you have to meet all of their requirements to be considered a licensed foster parent. You have to become a licensed foster parent, even if you're not fostering. After you do all that and get approval, you can, with your licensing worker, discuss ages, genders, things like that you're interested in, and they can start trying to match you with children. There are also events and it sounds so bad, and this is a whole video on its own because it's terrible. But if you've ever seen Instant Family, there was a picnic in a park and all these kids are playing and the prospective parents come and go around and meet the kids. Those events happen. I've heard of them being speed dating. I've heard of them in a park. But yeah, I can't imagine how traumatizing that is for a child. And again, that's a whole nother video for its own issues, but they do match a lot of prospective parents with children that way. So I guess that's their way of saying, look, I realize this is bad, but it's worth it because we find a bunch of families for these kids that need homes. But anyway, that's one route that people can find children. There's also adoptuskids.org that has waiting children listed with their picture and a little bio about them. And also different agencies will have books, portfolios, a database of children that are within their agency who are actively free for adoption. So you will find a child you're interested in. The agency will submit a home study on your behalf when you tell them you're interested. If there's multiple families interested in the child, then the child's team, their social worker, their guardian ad litem, sometimes a therapist, will come together and go through the different families' profiles and narrow down who they think is the best fit for the child. And then you will start getting visits with the child. Typically they start as let's just go get ice cream for an hour or two. And then it can turn into half day, which can turn into whole day. And you just kind of gradually build up time. Eventually it can turn into like weekends. Like they spend weekends at your house, and eventually they will move in. Once they are placed with you in the state of North Carolina, where I live, you have to foster that child for 6 months before you can adopt them. So that doesn't mean if they're legally free and clear for adoption, they're not going to reunify with their parents. That's already been taken off the table. But they call it fostering because they want to make sure it's the right fit for the child before they actually, and the right fit for the parents before they actually sign the adoption paperwork, because it's so much more trauma if the child gets officially adopted and then at some point the parents are like, I can't do this. This isn't right for us. So the child will live with you for 6 months. You will have continued home visits where the social workers, the guardian ad litems, come and visit you and the child for those 6 months. They help you with any resources you might need. They try to help problem solve if any problems come up. And they act as just resources for your family. And after that 6 months, if everyone is on the same page that it's the right fit, then you can move forward with the actual adoption. And I will talk about the paperwork portion of that in just a moment. So that is one way that people do it. That way can be relatively quick. I know people who have met kids their first weekend being licensed and adopted them 8 months later because they did, 2 months of transitioning into the home and then 6 months of fostering the kid. So within 8 months, the child was adopted. But I've also heard of people who go years and years and years before getting matched with a child. So that can be a rough way to go, but it's also, if you really don't think that you can foster and support reunification, support biofamily, support kinship, then the other way is really not right for you either. So that is one way. The fostering route, which is the route my husband and I are, is that you act as a foster parent. So you do all the same things to get licensed as a foster parent, but you actually take phone calls for foster children, not knowing whether they're going to end up staying with you forever, or they're going to go home to their parents, or they're going to go to kinship members. So you get a phone call. They say, I have a child who is male, 3 years old. Here's a tiny bit of information. Do you want to take the kid? And you have to decide yes or no, not knowing what the outcome's going to be. So my husband and I have fostered in the years that we have been foster parents. We have fostered 8 total children, and only 2 of those 8 are here to stay forever. Some have gone on to other foster homes for whatever reason. Some have gone back to biological kinship members like grandparents, aunts. None of ours have reunified with parents yet. There's one that we think might have reunified with a parent, but that child left us to go to a kinship member. And we think there's a chance that they might have, after some time with the kinship, reunified with the parents, but we don't know because we don't have contact with them. But none of them have reunified from our home, but we have had children go to kinship from our home. And then we have 2 who will be with us forever. Their parents' rights are terminated, and they are legally free and clear for adoption at this time. We have been approved to adopt them as we are their foster parents. They have been with us, and we said we wanted to keep them since they can't go home and since they can't go to kinship. Then they should stay here with a family they know and love. So that's the route we went. If you go that route, there are some people who get to adopt their very first foster placement. There are some who don't get to adopt a foster placement for several years. So we did not get to adopt our first foster placement. Our first foster placement was 2 little boys under the age of 2. We had them for 6 days before they went to an aunt. However, our second foster placement of those 8, number 2 is still here and will be adopted by us. So he has been here for over 2 years at this point, and we are in the process of adopting him. There was a cat jumping back there. We also are adopting number 7. So number 7 came to us as a pre-adoptive placement. His parents' rights were not yet terminated, but they were definitely on track to be. And there was, given the circumstances in that case, there was really no way his parents were going to get a chance at getting him back. So we knew he was going to be adoptable when he came to us. And he came to us with the intent of us adopting him. But foster placement number 2, we worked on a plan with his parents for reunification for almost 2 years. So we did not know. There were many times during that case that we thought there was a chance he was going home. There were times where we thought he was going to go to kinship. We did not know what was going to happen in that case. And we were just here to support him, love him, take care of him until whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And it just so happened that what was going to happen was us adopting him. But we did not know that for the majority of the case. So that is the other route. Once you have been approved to adopt, in either case, you've done the 6 months fostering the child through like just strictly adopt, or you have been fostering the child and they become legally free and clear for adoption. The actual process is that there's a whole bunch of paperwork you have to sign. You work with your adoption worker on the adoption assistance. You go through if the child has any special needs, if they're in any special categories, any medical needs they may have, any diagnoses, any educational needs, and you fill out all this paperwork that says how much they qualify for in adoption assistance. And then all of your adoption home study, which is essentially the same as your foster home study. We had to submit a lot of the same paperwork for our adoption home study. It was a lot of very similar paperwork. So I'm really glad I kept all of my foster parent licensing paperwork because a lot of it was the same and I was able to reuse a lot of it. But you have your whole adoption home study and your adoption assistant paperwork that you fill out. All of that then goes to the adoption attorney who has to do something with it. And then we have to go sign some paperwork. So we'll have to have an appointment with the attorney, of course, on the attorney's schedule because they have other clients and they've got other stuff going on. So we will do the appointment with them on their schedule. And then they have to submit that paperwork to the court. The court has to do something with it, sign something, send it back to DSS, who then has to do something else with it. And then they have to resubmit it to the court, who has to do something else with it, and then they can sign the adoption decree. So it's a lot of paperwork that goes, adoption worker to adoptive family to adoption attorney to court to adoption worker to court, and then it's signed. So it's very involved and lengthy, but once the adoption decree is signed, the adoption is final. So in many cases, especially in my area, again, I'm not speaking for everybody, but in my area, the court date that you always see the pictures, meet me at the courthouse, the judge, bangs the gavel and says, you're adopted. That is just ceremonious. So most of the families, at least in my area, my county, my state, once the adoption decree is signed, then they set a date at the courthouse for the ceremony where the pictures occur and everything. But when they go do that, the adoption has already actually occurred. Like it's already final at that point. That's just ceremonial. DSS does officially ask the court to officially close the case now that the adoption's final. And I think that is part of the legal process, but like the judge asking the kids at that point if that's what they really want and saying, okay, I now officially make you guys a family. That's just all ceremonious. By that point, the adoption has already happened, at least in my county, in my state. So like I know a family who just had an adoption that I got to go to, and their adoption was actually legally finalized 10 days prior to their court date. So the court date is awesome. I mean, it's ceremony, it's a celebration, it's the visual closing of a chapter, but the adoption was already final by then. So once the adoption's final, the court case happens, DSS closes the case, you're done. Your attorney will often file the paperwork or help you file the paperwork to get a new birth certificate, especially if there's a name change, whatever name change paperwork needs to happen. They will instruct you on how to update Medicaid insurance cards and Social Security cards, and they sort of assist with all of that. You still have to do a lot of it yourself, but they can assist you, point you in the right direction, provide you resources. And DSS does drop away at that point. Like, they don't do continued home visits, they don't do continued check-ins, but they are still there if something comes up. So if something were to come up that you feel you need resources for as a family and you don't know how to handle it, you can still go back to DSS and say, hey, I adopted this child 5 years ago. They're starting to have a trauma response. They're in a new stage of life. Something's come up. We don't know what it is. We need help. Can you suggest something? Can you help us out? And DSS will help with that. I think that's pretty much it. But once they're adopted, like, they are officially, legally your child. Once that adoption decree is signed and stamped, they are legally your child. And you now can do anything with that child that a biological parent can do with them. You can sign medical paperwork. You can sign them up for stuff. You can post their pictures on social media. You can travel with them. You can get them passports. You can get them driver's licenses. Whatever it is that you would have to have DSS consent for while they're in foster care, you now consent for. You are now their parent. You are now responsible for that child. I think that's really it. Those are the two main ways. Of course, there are other ways. I'm not sure if kinship adoptions work quite the same. I'm not sure if kinship family members are required to become licensed foster parents if they're adopting a kinship member. I don't think the rules are the same for kinship. But I'm not a kinship provider, so I don't actually know. I have a feeling they are different. I think kinship can adopt without becoming a licensed foster parent, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. And I'm sure there are other ways to adopt from foster care. I'm sure there's other, individual stories and things that happen. I know there are parents who 3 months into a case will say, I want to sign my rights over, but only if these foster parents get to adopt them. There's other things that happen, but those are the two main ways. But the place to start, if you're interested in adopting from foster care, the very first place to start is to look for private agencies or your local DSS. It's called different things, different places: Department of Social Services, Department of Health and Human Services, Child Protective Services, Children and Family Services. It's called a bunch of different things, but you can just search foster care in X county, in X state, and something will come up. There's usually a resource person listed on a government website. You can also look up foster care agencies, private agencies in your area, and just go to an information session. But really the first thing is getting licensed as a foster parent. Regardless of if you're going to do private agency, DSS, whatever, you need to get licensed if you want to adopt from foster care is really the biggest thing, first step. And just other tidbits: make sure you're trauma informed, learn as much as you can about how trauma affects the brain, how trauma affects behaviors. And in childhood, there's so much that goes into that. And that's really super important. Learn from adoptees. What are some things that they wish their adopted parents had done differently? And just really make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into, because it's not easy, but it's definitely worth it, because no child deserves to be without a family. So with that being said, as you can see, I've been filming in natural light. My light is going down. It is getting dark. So I am going to wrap this up. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday week, a wonderful National Adoption Awareness Month, as well as Indigenous Peoples Month, Native American Heritage Month, whatever you want to call it. I hope you all got to spend time with family and friends and have some time to relax. And if you're considering adoption, do it, because you may not feel prepared to adopt a child, but no child is ever prepared to become an orphan. So with that, I'll leave you. Go out, shine your light into the world. I love you guys. I'll see you next weekend. Bye.